My entitled parents have made awful financial decisions their entire lives, and they are now demanding that I make a payment to them every single month just to help pay off the debt that they've placed upon themselves. And at this point, I seriously don't know what to do. So for a bit of backstory, I'm one of 5 kids, and growing up we always had food on the table, and my parents would take us on trips, we would go camping, go to theme parks, road trips, lots of stuff. I came to find out later in life that most of it, if not all of it, was paid with credit cards. My father's daily driver is a 2006 bright yellow Corvette, which he got brand new. My mom, who just retired from teaching this year, drives a Mercedes-Benz SUV. When I was 19 years old and went to Chase Bank to get my first credit card and start building my own credit, the background check found a Capital One credit card with an outstanding debt of over $25,000. This had been mistakenly tied to me because I share my father's name. I went to college without a scholarship, but was accepted into an aviation program, of which my parents offered to pay for. I did not fully realize at the time that this was all being paid for with a loan. Long story short, that loan exceeded $50,000, and I did not succeed in acquiring my certification to fly commercially. During the time that I was in college, my parents moved out of the house that they owned so that they could purchase land on a golf course, and this was a property costing over $250,000. While attempting to save money so they could build their house on the golf course, they rented property on this golf course. Between paying this rent, in addition to the monthly dues required by the Homeowners Association and Country Club, they have spent in excess of $2,500 every month since 2013. That is literally $300,000. All of this after buying the most expensive cars they could, going on cruises around the Caribbean, buying extravagant clothing, and eating at fine dining restaurants. Now, to fast forward, I got my degree in education. I worked as a teacher for 5 years before leaving the profession due to safety concerns. Now, my wife works as a travel nurse, and we do quite well taking care of ourselves, with me staying home to look after our 2 babies. We have a 2-year-old boy and a 1-year-old girl. My mother and father are pressuring me immensely to make payments to them so I can make whole their financial investment in me. This is an extra $400 a month that I simply cannot afford. I honestly feel like I'm being extorted by my mother and father, with their relationship being collateral. They feel deserving of being in my life as well as my children's lives. But let me be clear, the needs of food, water, and shelter aside, my childhood was not a happy one. I was really treated awful, and I'll just leave it at that. I know that if I refuse to pay them, I will be excommunicated from this family. I will be made the black sheep of the family. I will be spoken of only poorly, and furthermore made to feel guilty for taking their grandchildren away from them. This whole situation has me disgusted. It's like the sum total of their lives completely revolves around money. It is literally always about money with them. Part of me wants to keep them out of my children's lives, and part of me wants to say forget them and let them continue to deal with their own terrible choices. And another part of me wants to be a part of this family, while simultaneously wanting to completely ghost people in my life who would turn our relationship into slave labor. The idea of getting a remote night job solely so I could pay them back feels like I'm being reduced to slave labor. My parents could have done anything, and numerous investments could have been made, but instead, my 70-year-old father, who makes 6 figures working for NASA, will likely have to continue working as long as he possibly can. On one hand, I do feel bad for him and want to fulfill this financial obligation that has been thrust upon me, but on the other hand, I am simply too burnt out and would rather have nothing to do with them. And at this point, I seriously don't know what to do. Honestly, this is such a tricky situation because I really can't see where the original poster's coming from. On one side of this is literally your family. These are your parents. You obviously care about them and you want to help them in any way that you can. I think innately anybody would want their parents to be involved in their children's lives, but that doesn't ignore the fact that your parents were awful to you growing up. They literally willingly brought on so much debt into their lives that now you're the one being forced to pick up the bill. And in my opinion, that is seriously not okay. They place these financial burdens upon their own backs, not the other way around. They have been reckless with their money pretty much from the get-go, and now that they're in a spot where they're old and they have no energy left in their life, they now want to take money from you as a result of their bad choices. And honestly, that's not fair for you in the slightest. I know if I was in that situation, I would just start learning how to say no. I would tell them, no, I cannot help you. No, I cannot afford that. And if they really want to try and be like, okay, fine, you're out of the family, then that is unfortunately their decision and not yours. Because at the end of the day, you are more than a financial investment. You are literally literally their child. And right about now, they're only treating you as some kind of ATM to try and solve their financial problems. And if I was in your shoes, I would not take that for another second. If you like Am I the Jerk, you're probably going to love Am I the Genius. Check it out, link down below in the description. Also follow Am I the Jerk on Instagram and Twitter to see all the stories that couldn't make it into the videos. Am I the jerk for telling my poor friend that he's actually the privileged one now, after he now makes about $300,000 a year at his job? Here's what happened. So one of my very close friends and I met during our first post-college job at a prestigious finance firm, and we immediately bonded over the long work hours, the awful middle management, and the general soul-sucking nature of making PowerPoint slides and Excel spreadsheets all day. We'll call this friend John. That is not his real name. For the next few years, a lot of our friendship revolved around us talking about work and how much we absolutely hated it. A few years ago, I decided that I just couldn't take the corporate grind anymore, and I quit my job to move into the nonprofit world. While I now certainly make less than I would have at my old job, I'm exponentially happier, I'm a lot healthier, and I absolutely love the work that I do. I also still make a very good salary, about $80,000 a year, which I feel is more than enough money for me and my needs. John has been ambitiously climbing the corporate ladder and recently became vice president at his firm. He makes well over $300,000 a year. John grew up in a very poor family, and his relatives are still financially unstable and often ask him for money. I, on the other hand, grew up in a comfortable upper middle class suburb with parents who have always been financially stable. They're not millionaires, but if anything ever happened to me, they could and would help me out until I could get back on my feet. John does not have that privilege. I recently got offered my dream job, where I would be making slightly less money than I am now, and despite the money, I am genuinely giddy about this job prospect and was pumped to tell my friends. However, when I told John, his response was to say, "I'm glad you have the financial privilege to take a pay cut." And that was really surprising. I was hoping that he would congratulate me or at least be excited about me wanting this job or anything along those lines. I will admit that I snapped back at him and told him that he makes triple the amount of money I do, and that at some point he needs to realize that he's got privileges of his own instead of pointing out mine. The conversation got a bit heated, and we agreed to hang up and cool off before talking it over. Now, I'm wondering if I should apologize to John for what I said, or if I should just stand my ground. I'm feeling angry and a bit defensive, which I realize is the exact reaction that a spoiled rich kid would have. However, I do also think that it was a bit mean of him to say what he did at the exact moment I was so excited. And while generational wealth does give privilege that income alone does not, he literally does make over triple the amount of money that I have now. So it seems a tiny bit hypocritical for him to be calling me privileged. What should I do? In my opinion, I think both people in this story can do a lot better. For starters, I think the original poster maybe should not have said what they said. Like, clearly your friend hit a nerve, and this nerve is something that you did not want him to touch. But he did say what he did. He did basically call you privileged to take a pay cut, and that was incredibly inappropriate. But for you to shout back at him and be like, "No, you're the one with privilege," that in my opinion was also not the right move. And if anything, I think both of you should just get back on the phone, or at least meet in person and apologize to one another. You're clearly good friends. You both have been through thick and thin, and you both have a really good connection that would really be a shame to let go of. And also, there's no comparing between the two of you. I think there's a lot that you really can say about each other's careers, but I think it's very inappropriate to make assumptions about the true character of what's actually happening. So hopefully your friendship can work out with John, because obviously what was said was either out of jealousy or just in the heat of the moment. And I think by talking it out and trying to at least have some kind of common ground, you can hopefully become good friends again and get over this small bump in the road. My friend constantly picks up the tab for his expensive golf club, costing him hundreds of dollars just so I can play golf with him. And at this point, it kind of seems like I'm being really entitled, and I seriously don't know what to do. So to start things out, I am financially okay. One of my closest friends is rich in the sense that they have a $13,000 tennis court in their backyard. We went to college together and have been incredibly close friends for about 20 years. His kids call me their uncle, and I was in his wedding party. I also spoke at their wedding, and honestly, I can go on with the things we've done together. It's important to note that we were broke together, even though we went to a private university and our mom and dads pay for the tuition, despite the fact that the money was on us. So here's where the issue comes in. He took up golf. I've played for years and will play at the local courses and spend up on bucket list trips. Places like Pebble Beach or Streamsong or even in Ireland. He joined a nice country club as well. Whenever I text him to play golf, he always says, "Meet at my club." After 5 or 6 times, times, I told him that between guest fees, which are about $200, as well as a $120 caddy, it is a little pricey, and I wanted him to let me find a place that we could play that doesn't hit me so hard. We try to play about 2 times a week, so you can see how this would absolutely add up. For reference, I would end up at a course that's usually about $70. His issue is he can't always make a tee time. The club he goes to is first come first serve, which works given his profession. He just can't always make it to the tee times, so it's basically his club or bust. He also laughed at me and said, "Don't be weird." I always offer to pay, but he always just picks up the tab every time and never complains about it. I gave up on offering to pay because it felt like Groundhog Day. He asked me for little favors, I think just to make me feel good, saying stuff like, "Hey, on the way to the house, can you pick up some takeout or grab the kids from practice, etc." Now though, whenever I text him to play golf, it's become a given. His club, his treat. I found out from his wife he was going club shopping, so I got him a gift card for a putter. And this was for a Scotty Cameron, which is about $500. So it really did cost me a real number by my standards. But the math isn't even close to being fair. I feel like I'm inviting myself to his club, his treat, when all I want is to kick it with my buddy. I would even play $12 mini golf with him. Is this sense of entitlement in my head? How do I make sure he never ever gets that impression? What should I do? Honestly, I think if it bothered him, he probably would have said something. Like clearly he doesn't mind paying for your side of things when it comes to attending his club. He clearly has the money for it and he never feels like this is ever a deal breaker. So I don't think you're taking advantage of him. I think you're just being a friend and he's just wanting you to be around with him at his club. Like obviously you're still friends and obviously you still get to hang out, but I don't think you're acting entitled at all. It just so happens to be the fact that this really does cost a lot of money. So if anything, you probably feel really guilty for him paying for you all the time. I know if I was in that situation, I would probably feel really guilty and also a little embarrassed that I can't outright pay for it myself. So honestly, it doesn't sound like this is a big deal. I would just enjoy my trips with my friend to the golf club if I was in your shoes. Because honestly, it kind of seems like you're overthinking it. Am I the jerk for asking my friend if she's pregnant? Here's what happened. So my friend, who's a 23-year-old female, usually goes to the gym regularly and parties a lot. Lately though, I've noticed that she stopped drinking entirely and doesn't smoke at all either, and has stopped heavy lifting and isn't going to the gym as regular as she used to. On top of that, lately she'll often excuse herself to go to the toilet, presumably to throw up, and I've noticed that she's gotten a bit thicker. Now don't get me wrong, I'm not jabbing her looks. This is just something that I've noticed. When we were out the other week and I noticed she didn't even touch her Red Bull, I pulled her to the side to have a private conversation and I asked her if she was pregnant. She immediately flipped out and denied it. Right after that, she went home and I covered for her when the group asked why she went home. I texted her later that same night if I had overstepped and she simply replied by saying, "You literally called me fat. You're such a jerk." Now, I never did such a thing, but I simply let her be instead of arguing. Today, another friend told me she indeed is pregnant and I don't know what to make of her reaction towards me when I asked her in our one-on-one conversation. What should I do? Okay, let me spell this out for anybody who wants to talk to someone who presumably has gained a lot of weight or they're acting just a little bit different. Don't ever, under any circumstance, assume that a woman is pregnant. Period. End of story. Just don't do it. It is literally not worth your time and trouble to try and make that assumption, only to then get it wrong. And also, just because she's gotten a little bit thicker and isn't doing the normal stuff that she used to do, isn't some kind of excuse for you to be like, "Wait a second, are you pregnant?" Like seriously, that is incredibly cringy and you just don't ask a woman that. It is highly inappropriate and also you're not her boyfriend. Like why are you pulling her to the side to ask her that question? That comes off as a little bit creepy and you really should have minded your own business. So in my opinion, yeah, you're the jerk. Despite the fact that she is pregnant, this is something you simply should never ask a woman because the risk of offending someone is way too high and it's just not worth the trouble to try and justify why you asked them. My entitled mother refuses to help me fix a broken cabinet and instead decides to sit in the middle of the floor barking orders at me, trying to get me to fix it without ever lifting a single finger. And I'm honestly so annoyed and I seriously can't wait for my dad to divorce my mom. Here's what happened. To start things out, my mom is very entitled and always has been. I have quite a few stories about it, but this happened a couple hours ago and I'm still fuming. For some context, I'm still a teenager and I live with my brother, my mom, and dad. At the time that this happened, my dad was at work and my brother was still sleeping. We live in a 2-story house and the upstairs is like its own living area. So this morning I woke up, took care of my dog, and went upstairs to get some breakfast. I open the cabinet and walk away because I forgot to turn the TV on. I started to walk back towards the cabinet and I hear a loud noise. I look over and one of the shelves had fallen over. I clear everything off of it because there were some breakable things. I found the pegs that held the shelf up and put them back in the slots. I stabilized the shelf enough to go downstairs to see if my mom was awake, which she was. Here's the conversation that followed. I said to her, "Hey mom, can you come upstairs? I need help. One of the cabinet shelves fell and it's heavy." My mom said, "Is it an emergency?" I said to her, "Well, no, but I'd rather it not fall any more than it has." My mom then says, "Well, if it's not an emergency, it can wait until I've had my coffee." I walk back upstairs and try to fix it as best I can, and she comes stomping up the stairs and starts yelling at me for not waiting for her and breaking it even more. I started to move the objects I put on the floor, on the table, and other counters. She sits on the floor in front of the cabinet and starts going through everything else in the cabinet that she can reach, all while the shelf continues to fall. She then says to me, "Well, aren't you going to help me fix the cabinet?" So I walk around her and grab the shelf, and she continues to just sit there. She then tells me I'm not positioning the shelf right and that I'm doing it wrong. I move out of the way so she can do it the way she wants to do it, and she just continues to sit there doing nothing. I grab the shelf and I try again, but I dropped it. She then yells at me saying, "Can't you do anything right?" I apologize, grabbed the shelf again, and got it back in the cabinet properly. She then tells me the shelf above it was slanted and that I needed to fix that one as well, while she is still sitting on the floor. So I do the same process again, and I start sorting things out to put the heavy things on the bottom of the cabinet, all while she still is sitting on the floor. I eventually finished everything. I walked away, only for her to call me back over, demanding I help her up since her legs are numb. I help her up and I just walk off. And honestly, the plan at this point is for my dad to divorce her once I finish high school, and then we are going to be moving away as far as possible. I've been saving up as much money as I can, and my dad and I have created accounts without my mom's name on any of them. So once that divorce inevitably happens, I am 100% moving in with my dad. Honestly, good for you for knowing what's gonna go down. It's also really cool to see that your dad has your back. Your mom sounds awful. How obnoxious is that? Here you are trying to fix a cabinet that's literally falling apart, and your mom's just sitting there in front of you barking orders at you. Like, that is seriously so obnoxious, and I can see why your dad is divorcing her. So hopefully that day comes sooner than later, because from the sounds of it, this really seems like this is a much bigger deal than you're letting on. And hopefully this works out for both you as well as your dad. Am I the jerk for wanting to cancel a party that I didn't sign up for after my husband told me that I would be cooking for all the guests? Here's what happened. So my husband and I have been dating for 3 years and married for 2. Recently, we have bought a house together to start a family. It has a beautiful garden and is overall quite spacious. My husband, let's call him Paul, and his best friend Ethan have known each other since elementary school, and they are very close. Ethan hasn't had any relationship during the entire time that I've known him. Apparently, this is quite rough on him. So my husband decided that he would host a party for him at our house and asked me to invite all my single girlfriends, and then they were to invite their friends as well. To be honest, I really did not want to have a party in our home, especially with me being 7 months pregnant, but I gave in and said fine because I thought it would be fun to meet my friends and just get my mind off things. We chose a date for the party and invited our friends. An estimated amount of around 30 people, mostly women, would be attending. Even though I'm pregnant and I cannot drink, I offered my husband that I could be making cocktails for the guests, as this is something that I think is fun, and I like making fake ones for myself as well. He kind of looked at me weird and said, "Well, who else would be making them?" Which really threw me off for a bit, as this was his event and not mine. I then took the moment to ask him if he had called a caterer or how he was going to be feeding all these guests, to which he gave me a look and replied by saying, "I thought you were going to cook." Now at this point, I was sure I wasn't hearing clearly, so I asked him again and I got the same answer as before. I told him that there was absolutely no way I was going to feed 30 people and that he should either order food or make it himself. He told me that he was too busy with party planning and work and had no time, and that I should just be making appetizers instead, as people would mostly just be drinking. I told him that I would not be doing that, as my pregnancy has been hard on me and I didn't think I had it in me. He told me to just try, and I said no. I told him that he should call catering before it's too late. Fast forward 2 weeks, and guess what? He has not called catering and told me that I had to make the appetizers as it was too late now anyways. It made me incredibly upset, and I told him that I was going to be canceling the party because at this point it was stressing me out too much. He then called me selfish selfish and told me to quit being such a jerk and to just do something nice for his friend who he says is struggling. I do feel bad for lashing out on my husband, and I wonder if I over-exaggerated. So I need to know, am I the jerk for wanting to cancel the party that my husband is throwing for his best friend, all because he's trying to make me make all this food for all these people? What should I do? Your husband is absolutely the jerk in this situation, not you. You are 7 months pregnant, and he's trying to make you cook for all these people? Like, why would he not just get catering and make it easier for everybody? This seriously could have been so simple. Like, instead of trying to make your wife cook for all these people, who, by the way, did not volunteer to do this guy should have just called catering and had somebody else take care of the food aspect of this party. Like, it really would not have been that big of a deal, and it would have been so much easier than trying to force your pregnant wife to take care of all of it. So no, you're not the jerk in the slightest. I feel like if I was in that situation as well, and I'm 7 months pregnant, and I'm already stressed out of my mind about the pregnancy, I would want to back out of this party as well, because your husband is being unreasonable, and his decision to do this without asking you first is incredibly selfish. Thanks for watching. When you subscribe, make sure to hit the bell to turn on notifications so you never miss a video. To finish listening to all the stories, use the playlist at the top of the description. And if you like Am I the Jerk, you're probably going to love Am I the Genius. Check it out in the description below and subscribe.